Blue Wire Hustle proudly presents All Eyes on Cleveland. My name is Brad Ward. I am your host. Mikey's on the 1 to 2s. Tonight we have special guest Kyle Andrews of the Center Daily Times to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. As we start our AFC North, around the AFC North, kicking it off with the Ravens tonight. How are we doing tonight, Kyle? How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, as you can hear, I'm at a track meet, covering some stuff really quickly. But I always have time for my guy, Brad.
Yep.
I'm just glad to be on here with him and just talk some Ravens and talk some Rams.
Yeah, it's all good. So you got the track meet going on in the background, but that's all right. We're gonna persevere and we're gonna talk some Ravens here. So I want to start with, if you don't mind, Kyle, with the free agency here, and I'm gonna throw up. I got some visuals for us here, but so we'll add this on here. But tonight's show around the North with the Ravens outlook, obviously. But we're gonna talk about free agency. As a Ravens fan and covering the Ravens as you do, what were the goals going into free agency? Because I know, like, right before free agency kicked off, you probably got one of your biggest signings of the offseason, even before free agency started, with Zeitler, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Kevin Zeitler, we've seen what he can do, especially playing with the Browns previously, and he goes to the Giants. I mean, he was a fairly strong player with them too. And the
Yes.
Ravens haven't had a veteran right guard presence since Marshall Yonder. Sorry about that. Still got the starting gun behind us. But yeah, you haven't had a veteran right guard presence since Marshall Yonder. So that was a big one. And then of course getting Sammy Watkins. I mean, they needed another slot guy to replace Willie Snead. I mean, we all kind of knew Willie Snead was on his way out, and getting Sammy Watkins was huge.
Yeah, Sammy Watkins. So you guys, you courted what, Juju Smith-Schuster. There was some rumors about him. There was rumors about Galladay, but you land on Sammy Watkins in free agency. So kind of passing on that number one threat until the draft. Let's talk about the draft a little. Well, before we get to the draft, let's hit on some of the guys. So the main part of free agency for the Ravens was kind of like who you were going to be able to keep, right?
Yeah, I mean, as we can see, I mean, they lost two guys in Yannick Ngakoue and losing Matt Judon. That was two huge blows. I mean, that was most of their pass rush. But, I think some of these guys that they got, I mean, I'm covering Penn State now, and I know a lot of people talk about Odafe Oweh in the draft. Just getting him. He's a freak athlete. He's a talent. It's going to be really interesting to see what a guy can do, especially after he had no sacks last season. And I don't think that was because he can't get to the quarterback. I mean, he got to the quarter. He had 13 pressures the first game against Indiana.
Yeah.
But then when he turned around, rest of the season, he continued to get those pressures. He just wasn't getting the sacks. But then they also had Shaka Tony on the other side. Shaka Tony, of course, cleaned up. And with a guy like Owe, I mean, to me, he's the most interesting edge prospect that the Ravens have had since Terrell Suggs. So I mean, that's really, it's going to be intriguing to see what he can accomplish,
Yeah,
especially
that 40
replacing
time
those
is
guys.
Yeah, that 40 time is no joke for sure. So as we see here, these are the guys that signed with other teams. DJ Fluker, obviously a part of that offensive line. Judon, Ngakoue, and Willie Snead, right? Those are the main guys that departed. But, you were able to retain Tyus Bowser, who's a younger guy, right? There that you can keep an outside linebacker. LJ Fort, Pernell McPhee, I think, will still play a big role, right? And then obviously Eric Tomlinson and Derek Wolfe were the guys that you were able to retain in free agency. Talk about being able to retain Bowser and McPhee. Those seem like the key guys, right?
Yeah, I would agree. So Bowser, I think he had a breakout season last year. I mean, and all show up in a stat sheet, but the guy can just flat out play football. I mean, he got in on the pass coverage side too, and a lot of times you don't see that with a bunch of outside linebackers. I think that was a pretty good return by them, especially since he's a younger guy. Pernell McPhee's always going to be cheap. He's always going to set the edge for the run game. I think he's a perfect guy to bring in, especially the return, especially considering that he's been with the team. They brought him back it's been 2 years since he's been back with the team after he went to the Bears initially. So I think he's the perfect guy for that outside linebacking core, especially when you have a bunch of young guys. You got David Hayes coming in from Notre Dame as well to go along with OA, and I think with having more young guys in there. Also, we can't forget about Jalen Ferguson, who hasn't really flashed too much, but he's another young guy that needs a little bit more seasoning. And maybe, there have been some rumblings that the Ravens bring in Justin Houston. So, if they could do that too, I think that adds a lot to their outside linebacking core and being able to get to the passer.
Yeah, now they had Justin Houston in for a visit before the draft, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I've got up here the draft class now, right? And what were so if you're Ravens guy, before free agency, before the draft, what are your main two objectives? Was it, hey, we got to get a weapon for Lamar, we got to retool this offensive line, we got to make sure we still have the pass rush? What were the main two objectives you think coming into the drafted free agency?
The main two objectives, of course, I mean, me personally, I'm an offensive line guy. I love trying to fix the offensive line whenever I can because, I look at that Raven. It was a tweet that I had earlier today where I talked about how the Ravens' entire offense was the catalyst for, them winning the Super Bowl in 2012. And when I mean the entire offense, I'm talking about that offensive line, considering the fact that, they moved Brian McKinney over to left tackle. And then you also had, you move Coleccio Assembly inside the guard, and then you get Michael Orr back on the right tackle. And I think when the Ravens fix their offensive line, when their offensive line is at its best, I think that's when the team offensively is at its best. And you could see that last year or I guess 2 years ago when Marshall Yonder was still there, and they pounded the ball down everyone's throat. So I mean, this Ravens team, I just think that they have to, get in their offensive line was number one for me. I think pass rush was the other one. Wide receivers, of course, I think, you could tie that up with pass rush too. I think that was just as important. And, throughout, you have to be pleased with this draft if you're a Ravens fan. I mean, I think they filled most of the gaps that they needed to fill. You might have wanted to see maybe a safety in there too, or like an actual safety. But when I look at Stevens, they're gonna move him to safety eventually. I mean, he's gonna be a free safety in the NFL. And I think when you have a cornerback that has ball skills, that can also play back, I mean, that's gonna be interesting to see what he can accomplish. And then when we talk about Rashad Bateman, I mean, Bateman was. I think that pick, it couldn't have been a better pick for the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens locked up a ton by being able to get Bateman. I thought he was gonna be drafted in the first 20 picks, truthfully. But
right, me too.
It was just really interesting to see him fall to the Ravens at that 27th pick.
For sure, I felt the same way about it. So as far as Bateman goes. Dan Orlovsky says that Bateman is the second most important player on the team because they needed to get a number one wide receiver to keep teams honest. Is there some truth to that or no?
Well, I mean, I think that Bateman they keep them honest. Now I say he's the second most important player on the team. I think that's hard to say, especially when nothing's really gotten started. We haven't seen him play in the NFL yet, and I think you have to let him prove himself before you make any claims. I think after that first year, we could kind of see more or less what guys are able to accomplish, and gives us a little bit more of a baseline. But I think that, truthfully, if I'm talking about the second most important person on the team, I'm looking at guys like Ronnie Stanley on their offensive line. I think Ronnie Stanley coming back from that injury, that's going to be huge. I think we tend to forget, how important left tackles are in the NFL. And you could see as the Ravens kind of went on during the season. I mean, they lost that left tackle at certain points. I mean, or not necessarily a left tackle, because I think Orlando Brown Jr. felt he played as perfectly as you
Yeah.
could ask for, prior to losing him through a trade. But I just think that with Ronnie Stanley being out, you saw the rest of the offensive line suffered because, once you moved Orlando Brown Jr. out of place, I think that hurt the rest of the line. You weren't getting as good a run blocking on the right side. You had to throw in a rookie at times, and then also DJ Fluker, who, DJ Fluker, I don't think he was bad at first, but you could tell as time kind of went on during the game, he would get worn down, and he just wasn't the same player he was the beginning of the game. Um, and I just think they had a lot of mental mistakes, especially at guard and center especially. I mean, how many bad snaps can we talk about? Matt Skura, losing him. I mean, Matt Skura is a
Yeah.
very nice guy. You hate that it had to be somebody like him that would get treated the way that he got treated by Ravens fans. I think that was ugly, and you know we've seen that with all fan bases. But I wish him nothing but the best. But I just don't think he wasn't a great fit for that offense. I think their offense is more of a power running offense. Matt Skura is more of a zone blocking guy. Um, I think now, when they do get their whole entire offensive line back, now you're talking about you fix the center position because you got you have Bradley Bozeman, who's a natural center. You move him in, then you get Ben Cleveland, who's a mountain. I mean, that guy is 6'6", 240 pounds of pure muscle. He only gave up 4 pressures the entire time, like throughout his what was it, third? I can't remember how many starts he made. I want to say it was about 22 starts in college,
Yeah.
and he never gave up. He only gave up 4 pressures as a pass blocker. And we talked about, a lot of people talked about him coming into the draft. They were like, "Oh, he's stiff. He can't block that well." Well, if you're only giving up 4 pressures in the SEC, you can block pretty well. And he's the type of
No
guy you want
question.
on Lamar's left side. And and until they can figure out, once they get that under control, and I think right tackle is the one position I think they're kind of hurting it right now. And then once Ronnie Stanley comes back, you're also hurting that left tackle. But once that kind of gets figured out, I think Ravens now they can run the ball up the middle a little bit more than they had been. I like bringing back Gus Edwards too. Everybody always talks about how J.K. Dobbins he's great, and Lamar's gonna get guys to be able to. He's gonna keep people honest, but Gus Edwards is an unsung hero of that rushing attack because he's gonna pound you to death, and he's gonna
Yep.
keep you on your toes. And I just think that's the kind of play that they need. They need toughness, and I think that this team is better for it offensively.
All right, man. So I got to ask you about this. We kind of covered some of the off-season stuff there. It sounds like you think Ben Cleveland is a plug and play. They signed Villanueva to kind of shore up the offensive line there. They have that put together. You mentioned that maybe Justin Houston gets added in the pass rush. Are you still concerned about the pass rush at all?
I mean, I think every Ravens fan, they're always going to be concerned about the pass rush, considering the fact that they had Terrell Suggs there for, he was as short of a sure thing as you can get at as an outside linebacker and, as a pass rusher. But, those days are over. So I think they need to get a little bit more creative. I mean, I want to say a couple of years ago when they had Zadarius Smith, and they still did have Terrell Suggs at that time. It was a lot of people that were clamoring for the Ravens to re-sign Matt Judon. And I was like, I think they should go with Zadarius Smith. They were like, well, he's not showing up in the stat sheet as much. That year, 2018, Zadarius Smith showed up in the stat sheet, and he ended up cashing out because of it. But then I kind of went on and I told everyone, I was like, what the Ravens are missing is a versatile pass rusher. They're missing a guy that's going to line up on the inside. That can play the 3 technique even. It's a guy that could go outside, play outside linebacker, but then could also move inside and play inside linebacker. And that was something that Zadarius Smith provided. I mean, he was a big dude, but he could move. And, I think that getting a guy like Jason Owe, who kind of fits that mold of being able to do whatever he wants to do on the defensive line and as an outside linebacker, I think they're trying to bring that back. Because I've seen certain people say, well, Jason Owe, he's raw, he's this and that. But I'm like, he's versatile. That's the biggest thing. He's versatile, and I think that's what they were missing on this defensive line and the edge, too. I mean, they didn't have as many versatile pieces. So I think they're getting that back, or I guess more or less.
Yeah. You're watching All Eyes on Cleveland. Tonight we start our around the AFC North with the Ravens. Special guest Kyle Andrews of the Center Daily Times. Friend of mine, friend of show. He's at a track meet right now, so when you hear the gunshots going off in the background, no one is being harmed, just to let you know, if you're watching at home. If we talk about Eric DeCosta, he keeps on talking about starting the process on the Lamar Jackson extension. So I got to ask you, where are we at with the Lamar Jackson extension? Do you think it happens before this season?
I think it happens after the season, truthfully. I don't think it happens before the season because I think Lamar is going to try to cash out on as much as he possibly can. And, all the power to him. I think every quarterback should try to go for as much as they possibly can because, it's just a crazy amount of money to leave on the table, especially if he were to win the season and win the whole thing. I mean, the amount of money that he would get and the amount of money that he would command is just, it's insane. And I just think that, if I'm him, I'm waiting until the end of the season to cash out because truthfully, I think this Ravens team, as good as they were in 2019, I think that, this Ravens team has the potential to be just as good, if not better. So,
okay.
I just think they have to. I mean, if I'm Lamar, I'm waiting until after the season. I'm gonna try to bet on myself and make as much money as I possibly can.
Yeah, kind of the same thing with Baker here. It's almost like the quarterbacks, because of the cap crunch year, it's like they almost aren't even worried about coming to the table right now, where normally they probably would be pressing the issue a little for some security, but they just know that because of the cap crunch season and the cap's going to go up, that they waiting a year will probably benefit their total payout. I mean, all of these guys are probably going to command around $40 million, right? So a year, it seems like. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out and who goes to the table first between Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and of course Josh Allen as well up for an extension. All right. I asked that. Okay, so we've got Owe, you've got Pernell McPhee, you've got all these guys. Who leads the team in sacks this year?
I think Owe does, and the reason why I say that is, if Justin Houston's there, he's the guy that's gonna lead it. But I think Owe is the guy. It's either him or I think it's Tyus Bowser. Are currently constructed. Well, I guess what the team currently constructed. So, Tyus Bowser, he's been due for a breakout season when it came to sacks. I think this is what he does this season. And Owe, the guy's a freak. I think he's a Jadeveon Clowney type of guy. So I'm pretty excited to see what he can accomplish.
Is Earl Thomas trying to get $10 million off the Ravens still?
I believe so.
Is that gonna happen? What's the status on that? Do you know the standing on his claim to $10 million from Baltimore?
Still no answer on that. I think he's gonna continue to try to get that because he felt burned by the Ravens, even though I think reasonably speaking, they had a pretty good reason to try to terminate his contract.
Yes. Yes.
Bunch of conduct detrimental to the team, bunch of personal issues with players and missing team meetings. I think at that point, that does he truthfully deserve to get his money if he was doing the things that were claimed to have been done. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
All right. What is your biggest concern about the Ravens going into the season? What's your biggest worry? Where are you most concerned?
Choking in the playoffs. I think that's my biggest concern. We've seen it time.
Why is that? Why is that happening? You think?
I just think it's more or less like it's just I don't know if it's game planning. I don't know if it's not sticking to the game plan by the players. I don't know if it's players getting rattled. I mean, it seems like every season it's something different that happens. I mean, whether it's and usually it's the O line just like deciding that day that they're just not gonna block well,
Yeah.
or like bad snaps.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Patrick McCarry. I'll never forget what he said. He was like, "Well, I couldn't hear the snap count, dude. It was 10,000 people in the stadium. That was
Right.
not a full
Yeah.
Buffalo Bills stadium. No, those excuses, are pretty. That's pretty bad for a professional football player to make that excuse that I can't hear, and there's 10,000 people in the stadium. So I just think with things like that, that kind of hurts the Ravens usually with just mental mistakes. And I think
Yeah.
that's why they're choking. It's not because they're not just as talented or more talented than all their teams. I mean, maybe the Bills would still beat them because I think the Bills were a more talented team last season. But I still think that the Ravens could have played much better, and they could have also
Yeah.
blocked for Lamar. I mean, Lamar got crushed, and when he's out for the rest of the game, what happens to your season? That it's over.
No doubt. That's one thing that's for sure. You got to keep him upright to have a chance. Uh, let's talk about real quickly because apparently, I've been talking about it with the Browns, but I just curious. What's the status with OTAs in the Ravens? Are guys showing up to phase two? Or are they doing a virtual phase two? Are they planning on having guys in next week for the practices? Do you know how that's going to play out?
I know the first OTAs, they a bunch of guys opted out. Um,
Yeah.
and that made sense. I mean, I'm sure with these more COVID things, I'm sure more people will decide to opt out. I think it's smart play by the NFLPA. But at the same time, I think that's going to hurt the way football is being played. I mean, I've seen your tweets too about like the NFLPA being incredible, making selfish moves. And I mean, it's a reason why they're the worst. They're the worst players association in all sports. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just
Yeah.
truthful. I mean, like the
Yep.
MLB and the NBA, they have it together because they have strong leadership. But they have so many guys with the NFLPA who are just willing to, throw things away because for their own interests and, forget about the 90% of guys that don't make it past year 3. So I don't get
You
it.
said it. You said it. It seems like the leadership doesn't really speak for the mass, or the majority of the players, and oftentimes, especially with the message of staying away and stuff, it's almost not in the players' best interest at times, as we saw with Jawan James and now Deshaun Hamilton of the Broncos, who are losing out on huge money because they weren't at the facility. So interesting stuff there. All right, so Got to switch gears with you here real quick before we finish up. What did you think about what the Browns did this offseason?
Well, Jadavian Clowney, it's enough to be said. I think having him and Miles Garrett, that should scare the crap out of everybody. I mean, I think those two together, sky's the limit, truthfully. Um, I just think that's a scary bunch right there. That is a very scary bunch, and I think they're going to put a ton of pressure on the Ravens this season. We talked about last year how great of a matchup that was. I mean, this year is going to be even better, in my opinion.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we feel great because, they kind of remade their defense. They got John Johnson, great safety from the Rams, brought in Troy Hill, kind of redoing that secondary. They were able to get Newsome and Owosu Koromoa in the draft. So we're feeling really good about the defense, which struggled last year, held their own, but were depending on guys they shouldn't have really been depending on because of injuries and COVID and whatnot. But I feel pretty good about what they did in the offseason. That brings me to the ultimate question here. I want you, if you're up to the task, sir, take me through the AFC North from last to first. Your predictions.
I guess I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Browns first. I'm gonna go Browns first, and then I'm gonna go Ravens second. Uh, I'm gonna go after that. I'm gonna go with the Bengals. Actually, I'm picking the Steelers last. I just think the Steelers haven't made that much of a point. Well, I mean that's a tough one. I mean I think the Bengals are better if Joe Burrow's out there beginning of the season, which I think he will be. I think the Bengals are a better team. I know they still made the dumb decision of not getting Pinocchio, but I still think that having Jamar Chase. I mean, Jamar Chase is a freak. So if he can get the ball in his hands and make dynamic plays like I think he can, I think they'll be a pretty scary team, and I'm sure they'll be able to get the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands a little bit quicker this season.
I think so too. Let me ask you this: when you saw the schedule, Kyle, what did you think about the Browns and Ravens portion of the schedule? Twice in 3 weeks, the Browns get a bye in between, while the Ravens have to go to Pittsburgh while they play each other twice in 3 weeks. Weird scheduling. Probably the AFC North will be decided in those 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think the Browns. I think they split, truthfully, but I think that the Ravens. The problem is I think they're still trying to gel a lot of stuff together, and I think the Browns are a little bit more cohesive. Right now, especially on those additions that they made with a bunch of veterans on the defensive side of the ball. I think that gives them the edge, but I still think it'll be pretty close, and it's not for lack of trying. I think the Ravens finish second. I don't think it's because they're worse. They're that bad. I mean, they're much worse than the Browns. I just think that the Browns are just, that tough team. The Browns look great. They do on paper, and they look great last season. So we'll see what happens. And having Odell come back, we'll see what he can do too.
Yeah, man, they slayed a lot of demons last year, but the one they didn't slay was the Ravens. They couldn't get over that hump, so they got to get over that hump this year. Big thanks to Kyle Andrews there hopping on and talking Ravens with us tonight on All Eyes on Cleveland, as he was at a track meet there, and as you could hear in the background, but he did a tremendous job. Anyways, covering the Ravens, we got through everything we wanted to cover with him, and with that, we're gonna get out of here for the night. The Ravens, they're depending on some guys, Tyus Bowser, Pernell McPhee, and then Jason Oweh, who they're going to have to plug and play. They're going to have to plug and play Ben Cleveland, who is a good blocker on the offensive line. But they're depending on some young guys to step up, and they do that. You know, and they made the decision to let some guys go, like Ngakwe and Judon, who really just couldn't afford them at this point, and will depend on those guys to step up. McPhee, Bowser, they still have Derek Wolf there off the edge, but the pass rush is a question mark. They did bring in Justin Houston before the draft. I think that Houston is a guy that they may potentially bring in before the season starts. Certainly, that would supplement that pass rush. Their offensive line, they have retooled despite losing Trent Brown and a number of guys, Yonda, all of those guys. So they've got, Ronnie Staley. They'll kick, I think it's Bozeman to the inside. Ben Cleveland maybe at right guard. They signed Villanueva from the Steelers, who I am not very high on, and I didn't think played that well for the Steelers. I know his PFF grades are okay and things like that, but it seemed like the Browns were always getting pressure on Villanueva when they played the Steelers, so that doesn't really scare me as much as far as the pass rush concerned. So, a lot of talk today after, the article I wrote about OTAs and everything, and the Browns and J.C. Treader as the president of the NFLPA. Hey, man, I'm just saying that NFL is about having an edge, and when teams are out on the field in phase 2, which is, coaching level basic walkthroughs on the field, that's something that the Browns are going to have to do at some point, whether it's in camp or now. So if you can get it out of the way now and have your defense, which is 80% new starters-wise, if you can get that out of the way now and start to get the scheme installed now, then that's an advantage. Surely I know and am totally aware that Stefanski knocked it out with the Zoom and installing the offense through the Zoom last year. I'm not concerned so much about the evolution of the offense, which I am going to have an episode on, because Stefanski talked about the evolution of the offense. Jake Burns is going to come on and talk about what we want that offense to evolve into this year. But for me, it's really about the defense, right? All the new guys getting together, getting on the field, going through walkthroughs, and even next week with OTAs, which are non-contact practices, can they get some of these newer guys in? We'll have to wait and see, as Treader still pounds the table and says that he and none of his guys are going to be there. Not saying it's the end-all, be-all, or it's going to affect the season huge, but NFL is about getting an edge and having an edge, and when teams are out on the field right now and the Browns aren't, it feels like they're missing out, and it's time that they're going to have to spend that they could be spending on something else later on down the road. Not a huge deal, but something that is coming to light here with the president of the NFLPA on the roster. As we get ready to go tonight, we will look to next week. Garrett Bush of 92.3 The Fan will be on Thursday night with us, and we are efforting a guest for Wednesday night. I cannot divulge that information yet, but G. Bush of 92.3 The Fan will be with us on Thursday, 7 p.m. Wednesday, we will have a guest as well and another show. Stick with us at All Eyes on Cleveland. Hit the subscribe button on your way out. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for those of you who watched. And, let me get to some comments here on the way out. As Monty kicking in with a few comments here. Steelers comments. If you can block in the SEC, surely. And too much invested in Lamar Jackson. He should stay there. Of course, he will be staying there, surely, as they sign him to that. And, makes me respect Tom Brady more for organizing illegal workouts. Yeah, so some comments. Thank you, Monty, for the comments on the show. You are a good man, sir, and I appreciate your input, as always. And go check out the full Monty show on YouTube, as I am a frequent flyer there as well. This has been another episode of All Eyes on Cleveland. G. Bush next Thursday, another show on Wednesday. And thank you all for watching. Hit subscribe on your way out. Mikey on the ones and twos. Big thanks to Kyle Andrews of the Center Daily Times for making time for us at his track event where gunshots and whistles were run amok in the background of that interview. And with that, we're going to get out of here. If Mikey can get me out, we'll get out of here. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good evening. Go enjoy some NBA basketball or whatever floats your boat tonight. And with that, we're out.